When looking at weapons throughout history, you're likely to come across legendary figures who wielded legendary swords that changed realities. Mostly though, it comes in myths and legends, right? For example, King Arthur's Excalibur, which is known to have a mystical aspect, whereby it was planted in stone and only the true king would be able to pull it out. And there are many other examples you can find in Arthurian legend, or you can even look at Norse mythology and see swords like the Angurvadal or the Kusanagi in Japanese folklore. All of these had abnormal powers and mystical aspects. But what if I told you a sword of such stature and significance actually existed in Arab and Islamic history? A sword wielded by a noble warrior which changed realities and made the unthinkable happen. A sword which is symbolic and brings pride and honor for billions around the world today. I present to you the greatest sword in Arab and Islamic history. Zulfikar. Welcome to the Golden Middle Age. You may have heard about this sword before, or seen it somewhere in religious circles. It's unique in many ways, and so was the man who wielded it. But it can be argued that the Zulfikar is before the time period we usually cover, so it's before the Middle Ages and was present during the establishment of Islam in Arabia, and also post-Islamic Arabia. But the reason we are talking about Zulfikar is because when we discuss Arab and Islamic swords and medieval weapons in general, it would be almost a crime to leave it out. It had so much influence on future generations and created outstanding victories, which are spoken about up until today. As I said at the beginning of the video, this is the greatest sword and weapon in Arab and Islamic history. And Zulfikar translates to the splitter. It could also translate to the spine splitter, but it makes sense as to why it was called this. And the one we have with us now is the most common depiction of Zulfikar nowadays, which probably could have evolved throughout history. This is a single-edged sword, so the blade is sharp on one side, as you can see. And one thing is certain about Zulfikar though, is that it had the two-prong tip. This is what made it very unique. But this sword did exist 1400 years ago, so different variations and interpretations could have been prevalent. But this is the most common form nowadays, and as I said earlier, as we know for certain, is that it had this two-prong tip. And it does take the shape of a saber, and I think this is because of the Turkish influence. The Turks were really inspired by this sword, so they would refer to it a lot, put it on their flags during the Ottoman era, and even before that in the Middle Ages when Turkic empires were very powerful. And this is why it possibly has this shape now, because we know that curved sabers or swords became the most used sword by the 15th century in the Arab and Islamic world. But on the other hand, this could be what it exactly looked like. If it was curved, then that would have been another unique and distinctive feature about Zulfikar, because as we know, in 7th century Arabia, most swords were straight. And straight swords were even the norm going into the Middle Ages. But Zulfikar stood out against all of those weapons regardless. Firstly though, what makes it unique? Well, many things. The Zulfikar was the first in its kind to have the double end point, which is why it's known as the double-pronged sword, as we mentioned earlier. But would this have been effective in combat? Potentially. It could have been used to trap the incoming strike from the opponent's sword, especially on a 1v1 duel. Arab armies used to call their champions before battles to have one-on-one duels before engaging in a full battle. So this one advantage the double-pronged tip could have potentially had. But the bigger advantage was the knight that wielded it, Ali Ibn Abi Talib. He was a known warrior in Arabia and so ferocious on the battlefield. It is said that in the Battle of Badr, one of the main battles the Prophet Muhammad had to face, this was even before Zulfikar existed. Ali ibn Abi Talib took out half of the opposing army. It is said that in the battle the opponents lost 70 men and 35 of them by the sword of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And this was set to become a trend in many Islamic battles that took place after, whereby Ali and the Zulfikar would make history. So what about how Zulfikar came to be? Was it forged by a blacksmith like any other sword? Most sources say no. In fact, Zulfikar has a very mystical aspect to it. It is said that in the Battle of Uhud, where the Muslim army suffered a counterattack and were ambushed by Khalid ibn Walid, unfortunately the Prophet Muhammad was left alone with only a few of his companions, and one of them was Ali ibn Abi Talib. He ran to defend his leader, and it is said that they stood back to back and fought off the enemy alone and managed to hold their ground. After this specific event, Zulfikar descended from the heavens and was brought down by the Archangel of God, Gabriel. It was bestowed upon the Prophet Muhammad as a holy weapon for justice. And then the Prophet Muhammad gave it to Ali. So this meant that only the bravest and noblest and most honorable warrior would be able to wield it, which is why the Prophet gave it to Ali Ibn Abi Talib. And when this happened, the angel cried from the sky, La fata illa Ali, la sayfa illa Zulfikar. And this was engraved on the sword. It says La fata illa Ali, la sayfa illa Zulfikar, and this translates to there is no sword like Zulfikar, and there is no man or hero like Ali. This warrior and his sword defeated the greatest of Arab warriors in their time. Many battles can be referred to. For example, in the Battle of the Trench, Ali faced one of the most formidable warriors of the Arabs, known by Amr ibn Abd Wud. Amr was known to be a legendary undefeated Arab warrior. And as we know, before the battle, Arab custom was to firstly have one-on-one duels. Amr came out boasting and challenging the Muslim army. However, no one stepped in to fight him because they knew of his reputation and how ferocious he was on the battlefield. However, Ali was the only one that came forward, and after an intense fight, the armies couldn't see the two fighting because of how much sand and dust came into the air. Ali defeated Amr with Zulfikar. It brought victory to the army of the Prophet Muhammad. Also, in Arab tradition at that time, the victor would usually take the armor of the person they defeated as booty. However, Ali refused to take it, despite it being the most expensive and glamorous armor in Arabia because of Amr's status. The sister of Amr found out about her brother and saw that Ali kept his word by not taking the armor because it was a family jewel for them. She exclaimed that she was proud her brother was slain by Ali. And this is a very touching incident which shows the chivalry of Ali and gives us an insight into him and how he was a true warrior with honor on the battlefield. And this is why he and his sword Zulfikar made history and is revered by many in today's world. But these two battles we mentioned were not the only ones where Ali and the Zulfikar shocked Arabia. We can refer to the Battle of Khaybar, where the Muslim army had to siege a fort. Ali faced another warrior renowned in Arabia known as Marhab ibn Harith. After defeating him with Zulfikar, Ali ibn Abi Talib, with his own bare hands, ripped the gate off the ground, which was guarding the fort. And it is said that the gate needed between 40 and 70 strong men to lift it. Yes, this sounds impossible and unrealistic, but it happened. And the siege was successful single-handedly because of Ali. These are well-documented events, and this is why what happened at Khaybar and many other battles made history. And what was accomplished by Ali ibn Abi Talib and his sword Zulfikar changed realities and can never be done again.
كان سمح سخي الضحي رضي مقدام أربطهم عنانا وأثبتهم جنانا أسد باسل يطحنهم في الحروب إذا ازدلفت الأسنة وقربت الأعنة طحن الرحى. ليث الحجاز مكي مدني أدري أحدي من العرب سيدها. ومن الوغى ليثها. In attempting to understand the past, to understand legendary figures, weapons and events that changed the course of history, we create, we film, we test, we reenact, and we read and research. But can we ever grasp the true reality behind these events? Can we ever come close to understanding the effect they had on people during that time? Would we ever come as close as those who saw these extraordinary events unfold right in front of their eyes? Maybe not. But we can see how this has affected millions in our world today. And what we can say for certain is, لا فتى إلا علي، لا سيف إلا Zulfikar.